Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Obi discovers his wife has been emotionally and physically involved with her therapist. He uncovers evidence of her infidelity and confronts her, leading to a revelation of the affair's extent. Despite her attempts to reconcile with promises of intimacy, he chooses to divorce her. The therapist loses his license, his family, and his relationship with the wife. She faces consequences including alimony and unemployment. Now let's get into the story. My wife, 33 female, decided to cut me 38 male off from intimacy. She also stopped helping around the house, expecting me to handle everything without her. She claimed it was because I needed to earn back the privileges of a good husband. I was feeling starved of connection and reassurance whenever I tried to talk things out with her. I didn't understand what the problem was, because every time I tried to get a straight answer out of her, she'd bend it, change the facts, redirect it, or answer with another question. Nothing was making sense, but she wanted me to believe the division between us was my fault. I knew what was happening. When she told me she planned to attend a women's-only event, she knew I couldn't ask to go. And if I tried to ask her to stay, she would say I was denying her what she needed, even though that's exactly what she was doing to me. While I couldn't sleep, I went through her accounts, phone records, and search history. I paid a few dollars to trace some suspicious numbers she communicated with a lot. One number specifically was seen 10x more than her mother, who she always kissed up to. This was her therapist's personal cell. I did some more searching and found he lived in the same town, where my wife booked a hotel for her women's-only event. On the second night, she was gone. I put together a timeline of events that included all the facts I uncovered and the conversations we had. She was doing some pretty disturbing internet searches, including how marriages turn out with your therapist, how to hide assets during a divorce, how to catfish someone, and if a therapist can lose their license for having intimate with their client. She was in love with AP and Googled him almost every day. She did background checks on him and his wife, too. I confronted her via text while she was on her trip, outlining all the evidence. I called AP by name and told her she needed to come clean if she intended to fix our relationship. She came home a day early and wanted to know how I found all this out, but I didn't need to tell her anything. It didn't take long for her to come clean about everything and even provide me details. She said her and AP first had intimate 3 months ago, around the time she stopped having intimate with me. But their emotional affair started almost a year ago. She told me she wanted to stay married to me while she continued sleeping with her therapist to see where things went. I knew immediately I was going to report AP to the board and have his license revoked. My wife tried to persuade me to stay married to her by tempting me with amazing and fun intimacy opportunities like threesomes. As much as I didn't want to go through a divorce and end the marriage we had, I didn't want to be a pushover. I didn't want to be manipulated by someone that didn't deserve to have my love and support. She manipulated me by cutting me off from intimacy and any help around the house. She stopped being the wife I knew and loved and only considered giving that back to me if I let her have what she wanted, which was other men. What if this had been the other way around? If I started an affair with another woman and my wife found out? You know as well as I do that she would have divorced me and gotten to keep the house and half my income for the foreseeable future. This woman was nothing but a selfish waste of space. I saw that truth even though I loved her in the past. She betrayed me, and I wouldn't be made a fool by giving in to her demands and continuing this broken, dirted relationship. I had proof of her infidelity. If my wife wanted an open relationship, she should have talked to me about it. If she talked to me about it instead of cheating on me, we might have been able to save our marriage. We could have talked about when we got married, how we vowed to commit all our love to each other. That's what made it so meaningful. As soon as someone decides to let another person love them, they run the risk of jealousy, mixed emotions, and destroying the bond they had with their spouse. My ex will be the first to tell it. It wasn't worth it. She pays me alimony now and had to move in with her younger sister because the mother she kissed up to so much didn't want anything to do with her. AP lost his license, his wife, and his kids. I think he might regret the affair even more than my ex does. After the truth came out, he had absolutely no interest in continuing their relationship. He broke her heart and made a fool out of her. But no one did that better than herself. My ex also lost her job after all this. So now she lives under her younger sister's roof as an unemployed divorcee. Today's second story. In this story, describes a relationship that started with hope but deteriorated due to Cecilia's infidelity. Despite efforts to reconcile after her accident, he chose to divorce her upon discovering she had a secret lover. Her subsequent loss of job and support left her struggling financially. The experience has left you with lasting trust issues. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I have been married for 3 years. Before we got married, Cecilia and I had been dating for a year and a few months. I met her at a bachelorette party, and she was the younger cousin of one of the guys I met there. His name was Andrew, and he seemed to be a nice guy. I can't explain why, but something drew me to Cecilia, although I didn't get to see her well that night until the next day at the wedding. She and her cousin were longtime friends with the groom, and they both flew in from another state to attend the wedding. After the wedding, I tried to talk to Cecilia, but she didn't seem to have my time, so I didn't disturb her anymore. Instead, I got her cousin's contact from the WhatsApp group we belonged to and asked him if he could share his cousin's number, and he did without asking for her permission first. Initially, talking to Cecilia seemed challenging, but I kept calling her, and in the end, she agreed to have a date with me. I am a nurse, so I had a 1-week leave, and I used the opportunity to go to the state she lived in and see her. From getting to know her, I discovered she worked with a marketing organization and had been working there for 3 years. We both realized we were single as we talked more, but Cecilia was not ready for a relationship. Her ex-boyfriend dumped her for an older, wealthier woman, and since then, she has been struggling with an abandonment mentality. However, I knew that no matter how she looked tough outside, she was just a delicate flower inside, and with the right amount of love, care, and attention, she would blossom and break through her barriers. So I did my best to shower her with all of that, even as friends. I even got her cousin to talk to her for me, so she could at least change her mind and be with me, and fortunately, she was the kind of younger cousin that listened to her older cousin, so she gave me the opportunity. We got closer, and I ensured I was there whenever she needed me because I loved her. The thing about me was that getting attracted to a particular girl did not happen to me every day, so when I saw Cecilia and liked her, I knew she was the one for me. So despite living in different states, I made sure I sent her flowers every week with a pack of her favorite chocolate until she said yes to me. When she said yes, I was literally the happiest man on earth, and as soon as I was due for my next leave, I hopped on the next flight to celebrate the beginning of our new phase of life together. I only had a few responsibilities, as the house I lived in was willed to me by my father before his demise, so I didn't pay rent and could save more money. Even without being with her, I would send Cecilia money to take herself to a fancy restaurant, go shopping, or even take her friends out on my behalf. I did everything possible to make her happy and not feel the distance between us until we married. After we married, her office transferred her to my state, and we began living together as a couple. A few months after Cecilia moved in with me, I began to see so many things I had not seen when we were in our long-distance relationship. She was messy in the kitchen, messy in the bathroom, and even messy in the bedroom. I complained about her habits every day until I eventually got tired, so I started cleaning up after her. She also picked offense to almost everything I did. For example, if I cleaned the house and she walked onto a wet floor, she would yell and cuss at me, which continued with almost everything. Then she stopped cooking and didn't care whether I ate. Instead, she'd bring home-cooked food from any restaurant she visited and would microwave the food the following day as her breakfast. Before these changes, Cecilia loved cooking and wouldn't go a day without making fresh food. She hated warming food the next morning, and she always woke up very early in the morning to cook before I woke up. But when this happened, she became a different person, became more distant, and barely said a word to me, even if she was at home on some days. It got so bad that whenever I tried to start a conversation, she would cut me off with the excuse that she had work to do or was too tired to talk. After that, she didn't even let me touch her anymore, and a part of me began to suspect that she was seeing someone. But when I couldn't gather any evidence, I just let her be because I had heard people could change completely after some years of marriage. Her cold attitude toward me continued, and she even started sleeping on the couch because of my nonstop pestering for her to do her wifely duties. One day, I don't really remember what Cecilia did, and I yelled at her, but instead of sorting it out as adults like we used to, she picked a few cloves and told me she was going to her friend's house, and she threatened me to not call her friend if I didn't want to make things worse, so I didn't. 2 days after Cecilia left, I was at home thinking about how things had gotten bad between Cecilia and me when I got a call from a policeman. At first, I believed she parked wrongly or something, but I was told she had been involved in an accident, and the police officer shared the location. So, without wasting time, I rushed down there with my heart nearly falling into my stomach. The last thing I wanted was for something terrible to happen to my Cecilia. On getting to the accident scene, Cecilia was lying on a stretcher and sobbing. Her hand and arms were bandaged, and she sustained multiple injuries, but the guy that drove did not make it, so his body was already covered. Not to sound insensitive, but I was glad Cecilia was okay at that point. I know we had issues in the past, but I didn't want her dead or injured because I wanted us to work things out and go back to being the happy couple we were. I tried to speak to her, but she kept sobbing, and at the same time, the paramedic guy came to me and asked if I was her brother because he saw me standing by her bed. I told him I wasn't, but he insisted that he called Cecilia's brother and not me. It was funny because Cecilia was an only child. So when I asked him to show me the number he called, he showed me my number and explained that Cecilia saved my number as her brother on her iPhone. I was confused because that was the last thing I expected to hear. I also found out that the guy that died while driving Cecilia was her boyfriend, and they were on their way to another state for a vacation when the accident happened. Whatever was left of their clothes was in the trunk, and I stood there, unable to say a word. It was just too much to wrap my head around at that point. I cried and asked Cecilia if it was true, and she nodded. She was still in tears because of her lover's demise, and she could not even hide it. Even with our nonstop fights and distance, I could not even think of being with another woman apart from her, but she chose to hurt me like that. To think that I was even planning to go over to her friend's house that evening, so we could settle everything, and she could come back home, not knowing she was already on her way to a vacation with her lover. She was eventually taken to the hospital and stayed there for a few weeks. However, I only visited her once throughout her hospital stay because I still could not believe she had cheated on me after all those years, and it was really tough for me. The one time I visited her, her friend convinced me to go and see her, but I ended up standing outside her room door. I just could not take myself in there to talk with her. Finally, when she fully recovered, her friend updated me again, and I went to see her on the day she was discharged. What she didn't know was that when she was in the hospital, I contacted a lawyer and began to process our divorce papers, and on the day of her discharge, I gave them to her to sign. At least I had the decency to wait until she recovered. When she saw me, she began to cry, went down on her knees, and asked me to forgive her, so we could return to being one happy family. But I told her it wasn't impossible and handed her the divorce papers. When her friend saw the divorce papers, she began to beg me too. I told her to stay quiet and mind her business. On the other hand, Cecilia continued to cry, and she begged me to give her a second chance, but I dropped the papers and left. Then I warned her to not return to my house. I already called her cousin to tell him what Cecilia had done, but he was too disappointed in her and wanted nothing to do with her. It turned out that the guy she was seeing was her colleague from work, and her company had that no relationship between colleagues policy. Knowing that she was married, they fired her to protect their reputation. So after she left the hospital, she had no job to return to. Her friend kicked her out, and her cousin was far too embarrassed, so she had no one to support her. The last time I bumped into her friend, she told me Cecilia was now struggling financially, and she did crappy jobs just to make a living. It has been 2 years now, and I still can't shake off the feeling that every woman out there might hurt me again as Cecilia did.